We've all heard the saying, gear doesn't matter. And that's very easy for someone like me to say sitting in front of a multi-$1,000 camera setup. So in order to prove this idea, I'm gonna shoot exclusively on a 20-year-old camera for 14 days. My advice to anyone who's trying to get into photography has always been go and dust off your old DSLR that's probably sitting in the cupboard somewhere collecting dust. And if you wanna spend money, just buy a nifty 50 and go from there. So that's exactly what I'm doing for these 14 days. I've bought a Canon 10D off eBay, which is a 21-year-old camera that has got 6 megapixels and 3 frames per second, and I'm pairing it up with a nifty 50 with a bit of an asterisk. And this is quite the downgrade compared to the camera I'm used to shooting on, which is a Sony a7R Mark IV, which is a 61 megapixel camera. So I'm dropping 90% of my megapixels going to a camera like this. But that's not gonna stop me. Let's go on my first photo shoot with this camera. So my first photo shoot with this camera, I took to a location that I know very well for sunrise and a bit of surfing action, and just to sort of run the camera through its paces and see what I'm working with. So I started down on the rocks on the beach, just capturing the sunrise, the moon, a bunch of other things that sort of captured my attention while the sun rised. And it's here where I ran into the very first problem I had with this camera, which was I was getting an error 99, which was not fun. So luckily I just popped the battery out, popped it back in, and the camera was working just fine again. Hopefully that doesn't come up again in future. As the sun rised, I slowly worked my way around the headland, capturing surfers about to jump into the water, and then capturing these awesome photos of the waves and the surfers that were there. And it's here where I hit the next quirk of this camera. Everything on this camera is just incredibly slow. I took a 3 frame per second burst, a few photos in a row of a surfer going down a wave, and it took 45 seconds plus to load the photo on this tiny LCD screen on the back. It took forever. I was just waiting there going like, is it broken? And eventually the photo loaded. Just shows how much technology has improved over these 20 years. After capturing there for a while, I slowly made my way up the headland onto the hill and captured some photos of the surfers from up high, as well as some birds before my battery prematurely died. Obviously, being a really old camera, I think when I bought it on eBay, the battery is probably also 20 years old because it did not last at all. So I've just got back from my first sunrise shoot with the Canon 10D, and it performed very well. The things I'm shocked about is the autofocus. The autofocus is ridiculously quick, like stupidly quick. Some things that I noticed that I missed in the eyepiece, so it's a DSLR, so you see right through the lens. There's no ISO numbers in the eyepiece. It's only shutter speed and aperture, which is kind of annoying. I had to pull up every time I wanted to change my ISO, but that's fine. Something I thought I didn't think that I would use that much is live view. There's no live view on this. Live view came to DSLRs a few years later, but there's no live view on this camera, so you always have to use the eyepiece, which is a little weird, but especially if you're trying to get low angles and that sort of thing. But shooting wise, I felt fine because it's a DSLR and I'm used to a mirrorless camera nowadays. I thought it'd be chimping a lot, which is where you like look at the back screen and see your photos. But it takes so long to load the photos on this camera that I'm really not doing that. The photos I get out of it, they take a little bit more work to edit, but they look great. Especially as long as you don't zoom in too much with that 6 megapixels, but just like at normal viewing distances, they look awesome. I even sent them to my girlfriend and she couldn't notice a difference at all. Like if I didn't tell her that it was with this camera, she wouldn't have any clue. So first day, things are looking up. It's looking very promising. The dynamic range was a little lower, but I expect that, and it honestly wasn't that much of an issue. You can definitely work around it and still get amazing results. The next thing I wanted to do with this camera was use it in a situation where it really pushes its autofocus to the limit. And in order to do that, I need to introduce you to someone. So internet, meet Olive. Now, if you've ever tried capturing an animal before, they are extremely fast when they're playful, and it's really hard to nail autofocus, even with some of the modern cameras. So I think this was a really good test to see what you can capture with older technology in terms of autofocus. So naturally, I followed Olive around when she was in a really playful mood and snapped away and got some awesome photos. With the camera, the autofocus felt really snappy as I was autofocusing. And for the most part, the photos came up awesome. They came up nice and sharp, nice and in focus. But there was occasional moments where you would autofocus, it feels locked in. It's made its little chime to say, hey, I'm locked in. And then you would look on the photo, or you'd actually look on the photo on the back of the camera, and it would look focused. And then you get back on the computer because the screen is so tiny. You would see that it's completely missed autofocus, even though it felt like it got it. And off the heels of those two photo shoots, feeling super confident in this camera's ability to take photos and be able to edit well and come up good, I decided to push the camera to its absolute limits by taking it on an astrophotography trip. Now, if you've ever done astrophotography before, you know that it stretches not only your camera to its absolute limits, it stretches your editing ability and your technical knowledge, and sometimes a bit of sleep deprivation as well. With this knowledge, I decided, hey, we're going for an astrophotography trip. I'm gonna use this camera to see what I can do with it. So on this photo shoot, I didn't use the Nifty 50 because if I used the Nifty 50, it would have been an 85mm because of the APS-C sensor in here, which means that I would have been really tight and not able to get anything good from the Milky Way. So instead, I stole my dad's 24-70 f2.8. Yes, that is an expensive lens, but I think it kind of shows that lenses are kind of more important than cameras. And at the same time, you can get similar results to what I'm going to show with a lower end lens. So nonetheless, armed with a coffee, off we went to capture some astrophotography. Now, when we got there, the Milky Way was a little bit too high in the sky. So we actually did some light painting with like a little lightsaber while we waited. That's where I hit another hiccup with this camera on that night, which was the self-timer option would only do 10 seconds. Now in modern cameras, you can change it from 2 seconds all the way to 10 seconds, but I only had 10 seconds. So there I was trying to time every photo while all the other photographers with me were using their 2-second timers. I'm trying to like go crazy early and make sure I get it in, which honestly didn't work out that great. Like some of my photos, you got the trailing light as they were walking off once they'd completed their photo and I'm still taking a photo. But that's fine, it's just one of the weird quirks with the camera. While to this point I had been getting good results out of this camera, it really did struggle in this situation, which, as I said before, astrophotography really pushes your camera to its absolute limits. So it was a bit of a struggle, but they're okay results. And further on into the night, when the Milky Way core was at the correct location, I hit my next struggle with the camera. As I said before, this camera doesn't have live view. It's one of the oldest DSLRs available and it came pre-live view. So that made focusing on the stars incredibly difficult because the way you focus on stars typically with a DSLR or a mirrorless camera is using live view. You punch in, you zoom right up to a star, you focus it so the star is pin sharp, and then you're good. But because I don't have live view and looking through the viewfinder, it's pitch dark because it's astro, I had to just rely on setting the focus to infinity and praying that it hit. And luckily enough, it did, or the 6 megapixels wasn't enough to show that it didn't. And I got an okay result. It's not the quality that I normally like to capture on astrophotography trips, but it was okay, and beginner Harry would be pretty happy with the results considering how stoked I was when I captured these on an A6300. So it's not out of the question using it for a situation like that. The next morning I used the camera to capture some bees just in our yard, and back with the Nifty 50 by the way. And I think this little photo shoot, it was only like 20 minutes long, really illustrates what I want you to take away from this video. I shot these bees using the 50mm just in the yard in broad, harsh daylight. But because I've got so much experience from hundreds of thousands of photos taken, I know that harsh sunlight in the middle of the day is going to look horrible. No matter what camera you use, it's going to look not great. So here's where I utilized a 5-in-1 reflector on the diffuser side to just soften up the light completely and get some awesome results of the bees buzzing around the lavender here. And this is only something you learn from failing over and over and over again, regardless of how good your camera body is or, you know, how good your lenses are. Without failing over and over, you wouldn't know that this is not going to work out at all and you need to change something about the situation. And just to highlight this, I took my Sony a7 IV, I took a 90mm macro lens, which is way more expensive than the kit I was using to capture with my Canon 10D, and I shot it in really harsh sunlight just before, just to prove that even though there might be more detail in these photos because it's a much higher resolution sensor, the photo, I would pick the Canon 10D photo every day of the week because of the lighting. And that's something that you don't get from upgrading your camera. You learn that over time and apply it to whatever camera you're shooting on, be that your iPhone, be that a 20-year-old DSLR, or be that with your mirrorless camera, for example. It's just something that you refine over time, and upgrading to a new camera isn't going to solve. And also, if you've gotten to this point in the video, you're probably liking it, so give me a like and subscribe for me as well. The next photo shoot, I went to one of my favorite local landscape photography spots and captured the sunrise there.
An annoyance I'm having with the camera. Currently I'm trying to get long exposure of like the water falling off there. But this camera only has a 10-second timer. So when I take a photo, I have to wait 10 seconds. So I can't actually time it with the wave to hit the rock, which is kind of annoying. So it just does its own thing. Anyway, it looks pretty.
I will say as well, the image quality on this camera is good enough so that when I post on Instagram, no one has said anything. And whenever I show anyone who knows I'm doing this challenge, they also can't tell that I'm doing like this challenge. Like, that's how decent the image quality is out of this. So you don't need anything fancy at all. You could absolutely get away with a setup like this. So, because there's no live view, this is what I have to do to get a low angle.
So what have I learned from this experience? Well, first off, your camera doesn't matter all that much. The main thing is getting out and actually taking the photos. You can have the oldest camera and still get awesome results that nobody would notice a difference on. While the newer technology make things easier by autofocusing faster, capturing more photos per second, you know, being able to change settings on the back of your screen, it doesn't actually reflect in the image quality at the end of the day. Image quality hasn't changed all that much over the years. Yes, my modern files, you can adjust the exposure a lot more than you can with an older camera. But honestly, you can get away with even, you know, if you had any semblance of a newer camera, you'd get really good results. And during the making of this video, I actually found out that my dad owned the Canon 10D as his first ever professional style DSLR body instead of film bodies. And because my dad has done what everyone should be doing and making sure you save and back up your files, I actually went back and found some old photos in period of this camera shot in RAW, and I re-edited them. And if I posted them today as I took this yesterday, you'd have no clue. That's how well the image quality stacks up, even though it's only a 6 megapixel sensor. And touching on a 6 megapixel sensor, that sounds horrific and unusable, but just remember, like an iPhone 15 Pro Max, that's a 3 megapixel screen. My 16-inch MacBook Pro screen, 7 megapixels. This video, assuming you're watching it in 4K, 8 megapixels. You really don't need crazy high megapixels, even for your average viewing distance. Yes, you might not be able to blow it up on a massive print, but I think you can, honestly. And it's not an issue. Like, that's not something you should be upgrading your camera for unless you like really love cropping, which I do, but just don't get suckered into specs and thinking that you're gonna capture dramatically better images because you've got this feature or because you've got this spec. Image quality hasn't changed all that much over the years. Just keep that in mind. If you've got thoughts, I'd love to hear it below. If you've got any other challenges or anything like this that you think I should do, let me know. I originally was going to do this for 30 days, but life kind of got in the way, uni kind of got in the way, and it rained for a bunch of time, and I don't think this is gonna hold up to rain. I don't think it's weather sealed like today's bodies are. If you liked this, you should check out this video here where I talk about a camera that every photographer should have in their pocket. And spoiler alert, it's a little bit old now. Anyway, catch you later.